Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm back with another video in my lockdown learning series of videos. And as you already know, this series is about corporate emails. So I'm back with another video. In today's video, I'm going to share with you 7 practical tips to write better emails. And to start off with, I would like to tell you that these tips are based on my experiences and they are based on logical observations. So they are really easy to understand and practical tips to help you write better emails. Now, before we begin with the tips, I would also like you to know that the tips I'm sharing today are not really rules. These are just things that are going to help you keep in mind the reader's perspective, and they will ultimately make your email more readable. And of course, writing with the reader's perspective in mind is truly to follow good email etiquette. So, with that, let's begin with tip number 1. Tip number 1 is a really important one, and I think a lot of people make a mistake with this one. So, tip number 1 is to send the email only to the people who need to see it. Now, this is really important because when you write an email, we have the to field and we have the CC field. In the to field, we should always only include the person directly responsible to take action. For example, if I'm asking for information, I need to address the email to the person that I'm expecting the information from. And that's it. That should be the only person in the to field. Now, the trouble starts when we start to use the CC field. Now, CC or carbon copy is a field that's supposed to be used to keep somebody who is indirectly responsible for taking action in the loop. So this field is not always supposed to be used. For example, for routine emails that I send on daily basis, I don't need to really have somebody in the carbon copy field. This is supposed to be used in areas where we really need a second person to be in a loop, and this person is going to act like a witness to the conversation that's been going on. A good way to use the CC field is, especially when somebody is likely to be on leave, you could then include someone else so that the email is not missed out upon. But as a rule of thumb, please do not include a lot of people in the 2NCC field. It's not great to receive 50 emails in your inbox, go through all of them, only to realize that only 15 to 20 of them were the ones that they needed to action. So don't be that person. Tip number 2 is to use the subject line to convey the priority of your message. Now, your subject line is really important because sometimes that could help the reader decide whether or not they should even read your email. I personally feel that your subject line should answer 2 questions for the reader. Question number 1 it should answer is, should I open this email right now? So the urgency or the priority has to be conveyed. And second, is there an action required from me, or is this just an informational email? Now, this is instrumental because once the reader knows this, your message will be well received and they'll be able to respond back well in time. Now, because subject lines can be so tricky, I have included a few examples here, and these are examples from the real world that I have picked up here. For example, I received an email with the subject line remote control software. Now that is really vague because I don't know what about the remote control software is the email telling me about. After opening the email, I realized that it was installation instructions. So why not call it remote control software hyphen installation guide? That makes it very clear. Number 2, security reminder. Again, really vague. What is it about the security reminder that you want to talk about? Is it to perform some security measures, or is it just to remind you of a policy that's already in place, which is very vague? Also, not to mention the use of the star or asterisk mark here, it really does not make your subject look so great. After opening this email, I realized that it was a reminder for everyone to follow the security policy and adhere to it. And it was a reminder to do that. So I would call it security policy adherence hyphen reminder. That makes it very clear. Number 3, figures for East regions hyphen Q3 2020. Now, although it looks like there's nothing wrong with this is actually a really long subject line. And I'm sure most of you know that the area dedicated to the subject line is a little less than what we would like. And sometimes the longer part or the longer subject lines cannot be seen altogether. So I would rather put it as Q3 sales report hyphen East region. It's always a good idea to drop the for, the, and the tos in your subject line. Number 4 is again an example of a vague subject line. And also because this person has used the caps to get your attention to make it seem like an important email. Look at what number 4 says. It says, check out our webinar on 8/1. Now, although they have used caps to get your attention, they are not really telling you what the webinar is about. So after opening the email, I realized that this was a webinar to discuss or to inform everybody about policy changes, and there was an invitation included in the email. So I would rather have called it policy changes hyphen webinar invitation. That way the person knows what the webinar is about, and also that what they have received in the email is an invitation that they need to reply back to. Number 5 is a classic example in the customer service world. It says urgent, and then there are 3 exclamations, and then it says customer threatening to cancel, need a meeting. Now, this subject line really has the emotions of the writer displaying on it. That's not really a good way to start the day for anyone. I would rather use the customer's name. For example, I would say XYZ call escalation, and then I would say meeting request. This way, the reader knows who the client is and whether they need to take action. And it also says that you are requesting or calling for a meeting. So these are a couple of examples of subject lines and how you could modify them to convey the right message. Tip number 3 is to avoid email conversations or chatting through email. Now, I am positive that at least at some point of time, at least once in your life, you've been part of this conversation where an email was sent to a group of people. One person replies saying, let's meet. And the other person replies back saying, I'm available at 3 p.m. today. And then the other person replies back saying that they have back-to-back meetings and they can meet tomorrow. And all this while you're just receiving these email notifications back to back. Now, these two are the only people conversing in this email. Not a great way to treat others. So best thing to do here is to ask, if you have questions to ask and reply back and forth, it is time to use the office messenger. You need to pick up the phone and call or use the chat messenger to communicate with this person directly. As a guideline, if you need to reply to an email more than 2 to 3 times back to back, it's a hint that that should have been a phone conversation and not an email, especially not to the entire group of people in that initial email conversation. Tip number 4. Tip number 4 is also very similar to tip number 3, but all the more important. Tip number 4 is to use the reply to all option wisely. Now, everyone knows that when a group email is sent and there is a button called reply to all, it is very tempting to click that, but you need to ask yourself 2 questions when you reply to an email that is sent to a group. Number 1 is to ask yourself, does everybody included here need to know what I'm about to communicate? If it's only feedback for the person sending the email, I might want to reply only to that person. If it's something that everybody on that group needs to know, then yes, I must use reply to all. And I would also like you to ask yourself, does the original email have any group email addresses? Now, this is very common. Almost every organization today has group email addresses where the email address belongs to a particular department. And if I include that email address, everybody in that department is going to get that email. So it's important to be aware of who this email is going to, and then ask yourself whether entire department or the entire group needs to see that email. Tip number 5. Now, this might seem like a small one, but I think it makes a big difference. Always include attachments with meaningful names. If your email includes an attachment, be sure to call it something meaningful. For example, instead of saying sales report or calling your attachment sales report, say Q2 sales figures. What that will do is when the reader downloads this, it'll be easy for them to find it as well. Another example here is instead of saying volunteer list, say referral drive volunteer list. So it is very specific. In fact, I have received so many emails where sometimes the attachment just says book1.xls or doc1.doc, and I think that makes it really difficult for the reader to later on go back to that information if they have to. Tip number 6, avoid using fancy fonts. Very important because that's one of the points that makes your email look professional. Emails in the official area are written to share information, and they should really be easy to read. Using unusual fonts is really not welcome because it makes it difficult for the reader to understand your message. So stay away from all those fancy fonts and stick to the common ones like Times New Roman or Sans Serif. That brings us to tip number 7, and that's the final tip for the day, but still a very important one. And tip number 7 is to include your full name and designation in the email. Now, this is something that goes without saying. Your email should have a signature, and your signature should always include your first and last name, as well as your department or team and your designation. Now, designation may sometimes be optional, but it's very important that the reader understand who the email is coming from. You don't want to leave them guessing. So, as a rule of thumb, always create an email signature so that whenever you draft a new email or even when you reply to someone, your email signature is present in the email. With that, we come to the end of today's video, and there are definitely going to be more videos in the Lockdown Learning series. If you have learned something new from today's video, please like this video and share it with somebody who will benefit from it. I'm also putting in a link for you to see my other videos in the email series. Happy learning, everyone. Bye-bye.